Hi, everybody. Welcome to Monkey Chatter. This is our first episode after our really awesome series on coaching. So, we've been interviewing coaches the last three episodes, I think. So, if you haven't listened to those, go on back and just some really great stuff. But out of that topic and all around coaching, we thought we might sort of continue a little bit about um, how brave you have to be to decide to work with a coach or ask for help. And then, of course, that got us thinking about being brave in general and, courage and all of that. So I'm here with Amy and Lara today, and we're going to talk about being brave and what that feels like for each of us and how it gets experienced. And it sounds like such a simple topic, and like you kind of know what brave means or what courage means, but then you start to dig into it a little bit, and all the different ways that people can show up in a way that's brave and courageous, and how much it really matters, sort of the lens through that, right? So, anyway, I'm going to stop it there and start to dig in a little bit. Um, and maybe I'll just start off by saying that to work with a coach for me, um, it felt so, kind of like courage, bravery, that kind of thing, because you really have to show up. If you want to do any really good work, I guess that's it. You really have to show up and be vulnerable. And Brene Brown is probably the one who does the most around vulnerability and shame and bravery and all of that sort of combination. But
Yeah, what's her doesn't she have a
yeah,
a TED Talk or something on is it a TED Talk or what's the
A bunch of them.
a bunch
A
yeah,
of
but
book.
things.
I feel
Yeah.
like there's one like specifically on
The
vulnerability that's
first
like
one, which was the first one she did, the first TED Talk she did, and she talks about how brave she had to be to do that. And then when she found out how many people actually looked at it, she kind of like freaked out. Like I remember hearing
Yeah,
that story
I
and
remember
being
hearing
like,
that.
holy cow, I can't imagine. But
yeah.
I think that was the first time I really heard anybody talk about how brave you have to be vulnerable and to and I remember when I first started working with a coach, and, you know, I think it's like a spiral when I think about it, it's like a spiral, right? You start working with a coach, and and I was a little superficial, right? It was just like, basically, how do I do better at work? How do I make more money? Like, that's why I thought I was going to coaching, right? And, but as you start to dig in, and when somebody asks you a question, you have a choice, right? On what level you're going to answer that question. And it really takes some courage to be able to say, I don't know, right? That's the first thing. It's hard for a lot of people just to say, I don't know. I don't have the
I
answer,
feel
or
like I
that,
Mm.
say that
right?
every
That
day.
makes me feel sad, or whatever it is.
No
Like,
freaking clue.
right? Like, it's super hard for a lot of people. So, I don't know. Those are sort of my original thoughts when we first started talking about this and sort of in relation to working with a coach. Anyway, what do you guys think?
Yeah. And it's so funny because of course, when we were talking about this, of course I come at this at from a totally different like
Which is why there's
angle
This is why
than
right.
you
it's so
guys. Yeah.
good.
Yay.
Um, but yeah, because like all my coaching has been like physical stuff, like personal trainers, running coaches, CrossFit coaches, all of that stuff. So, yeah, definitely
But
a
do you
little
think
bit
you have to be
different.
brave to, like, when I think about man, I remember the first time I decided I was going to go do like a CrossFit gym, and man, talk about like that. that was super scary for me, that first visit. But, like, I'm not Amy, let's just leave it at that. Like, it is
I'm no
not
professional
I don't
athlete.
like it, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like,
I do
"Why am
not
I
like it, Sam, I
doing
am.
this?" You know?
That's how I felt like you were when you called me too. Like, I don't like it.
Don't like it. And, so here you
Do
are
not
with these
like it.
people that, are and I'm like, "Oh my god," like, weights and boxes and things that hurt, like, I don't wanna be, you know? And I remember, yeah, I'm like, "Oh, I had to be a little brave." It was just such a foreign environment to me. Like, I think about people just who are trying to improve their fit, like, I can't imagine what it's like, um, for folks who are and I was kind of fit, I mean, I wasn't like an athlete or anything,
But
but
you
I
weren't
was
like a couch potato,
no,
like
I wasn't a couch potato. I wasn't, hundreds of pounds overweight. So it gave me a lot of empathy. We tend to say things like, "Oh, well, why don't people just go to the
mm.
gym or just start doing this or just do that?" And I'm like, "Well, this is why because it's effing scary." Right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
takes
it's
a lot of
overwhelming
courage.
too. I feel like it's
Yeah.
overwhelming if you don't know where to start, or
What to
you walk into a
wear.
place where
Right.
it seems like a club when you go into a lot of those
Yeah.
places.
Mhm.
Like there's people
Cookies.
who know each other, and it's like, it's like a little clique or a club. And if you're not one of those people, not part of that club, it can be kind of scary.
Well, that's like Yoga Land, right?
Oh,
Like, I'm
Yeah.
always so
yeah.
intimidated when I walk into a oh my god, I'm like, "Okay, clearly I am not like the others." You know what I mean?
I remember the very first yoga class I ever attended, and I had no idea, like, other than what I'd maybe seen on TV. Like, what's that sweet little Asian lady? She's Hawaiian. I think she might be Hawaiian. She does this Wailana. I think it's called Wailana. And she had like a show on public television.
Yeah, on
You remember
PBS. Oh
her?
my
Yeah.
gosh, yes.
She'd stand out on a rock and there'd be waves crashing behind
Yeah,
her, and Wailana, I think it was. And I would follow her sometimes, like on Sunday mornings at like 10 o'clock, I think is when she'd have on.
right? Yeah.
And I was like, one day I was like, I think I was like early 20s, and I was like, I'm gonna go find a yoga class. So I guess in a way that was a brave thing to do. But
It's brave.
yeah,
Yeah,
and I walked in and it was a pretty big class, and I just like sat in the back and just kind of followed along. It wasn't like an introductory class, it was just like a lower level one, and I don't know, I kind of fell in love with it. Um but yeah, it was kind of like the very start of the whole bravery route, I guess, for me, was walking in that place and doing that.
It's so funny, and Michelle knows this because she's heard multiple stories from my Wednesday night ladies.
oh, I love
Um,
Wednesday night ladies.
but I actually started, and Larry, I don't know if I told you this or not, but I actually started this little group at church on Wednesday nights for my little workout ladies.
Oh.
And the whole reason that I started that is because I wanted it, so it's only women, and like every single level is welcome. Like you
Mm.
can, like, literally I have people that are doing exercises up against a wall or from a chair because they don't want to get up and down off the floor. Um and the whole reason that I started that is because you hear people always talk about like being intimidated walking into a gym, which I get, from, certainly I've been in a lot of gyms and done a lot of stuff now, so it's not really such a big deal. But I get that. Like, if you don't know how the equipment works, if you're using equipment, if you don't know what things to do, there are these people in there and they're like tank tops and like walking around all like,
Their
you
matchy
know,
matchy outfits
yeah.
and
Hey,
Like,
let's
okay,
not knock
not
the
my
matchy matchy outfits. There's nothing wrong with that.
maybe we should teach a course on matchy-matchy outfits. I think
I
we
know
should
we have a podcast on
oh,
that if you're
yeah.
Oh yeah.
interested.
We wanna hear about matchy-matchy outfits. Yeah.
But like, yeah, I mean, because people can be so intimidated, and especially like I feel like as a female going into a gym, like I harp all the time about lifting weights. Like yes, as a female, you have to lift weight. Well, you don't have to, but
You really
things
should just
things
take it
end
from
better
the
if you
females.
do.
Bone density.
Take it from the postmenopausal woman, like, clearly, you really should start sooner rather than later. Just saying, we'll leave it
But
there.
yeah, like, so to get like, over to the dumbbell racks and all
Yeah.
of that stuff, it's typically a lot of guys hanging around there, and it can be super intimidating.
Intimidating.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so that's exactly why we started that little group, and I love my ladies on Wednesday night.
Well, and that's a good example of bravery. Like every one of them
It
that
is.
joins that group is doing something brave.
Mm-hmm.
Well, hopefully they're all listening.
Yeah. Please
I don't know. I don't even know if
listen.
they know that this exists, actually.
Oh, now
I'll
you have to tell them that they got to mention.
Do
Yeah.
I come out of that group every Wednesday night, just like, yeah,
I like
I always
these.
think of like being brave and in terms of like kind of like the typical things, but like before we got on today, like we were all kind of texting back and forth, and there were some other like non-traditionally brave things that really came up. So I definitely think we should chat about that. But I think it's interesting how like bravery can be, moving to a brand new city without knowing anybody, or even having a job, which is something I did that with my he became my husband, but at the time we weren't married, so I guess that was brave in itself. But we honestly like didn't know a soul. We moved to Lexington, Kentucky from, Midwestern Ohio, and just like I don't know, like we were young, so maybe you were more brave when you're young. It didn't seem like a big
Oh,
stretch, but
I want to talk about that. Like, because that's a really interesting question. Are you more brave when you're young? Or because I go back and forth with that. So I did the same thing, Lara, right? Like I packed up my car. I went to Lexington, Kentucky, interestingly enough.
oh, that's
Had
right.
Yep, had no job, had no place to stay. I had a friend at school at UK, and I'm sure this is against the rules, but I lived on her floor. I slept on her floor for like a few weeks before I found a job, and then moved into like a 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment with 3 other girls, and went to work on a horse farm, right? Like, and I think, what in the world? Like, I literally just packed up my car and left, right? So
Yeah, that's
is
so similar. Like that, and I mean, I think sometimes. So this is a good maybe a potential answer as to why people do stuff. So I think in our case, it was a passion that we both had, and it was the horses. We've talked about that before on this podcast. We're all horse girls. And growing up, I was horse crazy, and the only reason I wanted to move to Lexington was the horses. There was no other reason for me to come here. I didn't know anybody here. Well, technically one guy from college was from here, but my boyfriend at the time didn't know anybody from here other than this one guy. And we all just had this passion. So I think passions about something or some big interest can really be a bravery boost.
help you override, right? Override the fear.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
you just want to reach that goal of achieving or at least experiencing, working within your passion. And
yeah.
that's another thing, being women trying to get involved in a very male dominated industry like the racing industry, which is predominantly what the horse industry is like in Lexington. Not as much anymore. It's also a lot of show horses now, but it used to really just be racing, and that is very male dominated. And so when you came in as a woman, there wasn't a lot of opportunity other than like grooming and cleaning stalls and
Yeah.
showing
Getting the
horses.
crap
And
beat out of you. Yeah, it was
I,
awesome. Yeah.
I actually had a trainer who at the time was a pretty well-known trainer tell me to go back and work on a farm because racetracks were dangerous and it was no place for a girl. Yeah. And this wasn't that long ago. It was early 90s. He
Oh
was
yeah.
like, yeah, the racetrack's no place for a girl. You should really go back to the farm and like groom horses. I was like, wow, that's encouraging.
Thanks. Okay.
I
Thanks so
love this
much.
industry.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yay.
he can he can
Rename
remain the nameless,
this.
but and it's still pretty male dominated, but
Yeah.
I love seeing people follow their passions,
Mm.
and to me that's extremely brave, is to leave everything you know behind and follow a passion.
Yeah. What do you think, Amy?
I don't know. I should, like, this was not leaving everything behind. I mean, certainly when I moved to Maryland, like that wasn't really a like just that was pretty well planned, and
You're a
it wasn't.
planner, though. I mean, that's
Yeah,
sort of your superpowers.
it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't just a throw everything in the car and go. But when you were talking about the passions, like kind of, I forget how you phrase it, but like kind of make you override some stuff
Yeah.
and whatever. Like,
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about this run that I just did, like
Mm.
that kind of it sometimes makes common sense go out the window too. Like,
So that was
yeah.
another thing, like, when we were thinking about this ahead of time, like, so I started, like, sort of thinking the traditional, like, brave, courage, whatever, and then I'm like, "But what?" Then I started thinking about, like, taking risks, like people who are risk takers versus risk averse
Mm,
folks. Like I am truly a risk averse person. Like, I think that comes from early on, right? When you have things in your childhood or whatever that you see sort of worst case scenario play out, and then you spend sort of the rest of your life trying to make everything safe and secure. So something that for me might be a huge, huge risk and takes a lot of bravery and courage to do, because I'm like, oh, I'm jeopardizing my security here. Like, I don't know if I want to just use every penny I have to go do whatever, because, that could end horribly wrong. I should take this safe, secure job and not go start my own business. Or so, so I think sometimes for folks who are risk averse, when they do something that takes huge amounts of bravery, where for somebody else who's just a risk taker and is like, yeah, screw it, I don't care. I've lost all my money 3 times before. It doesn't matter if I lose all my, like, so the bravery and the courage, it's the same act, but it takes much more bravery and courage for folks who are risk averse or feel like they're really risking everything, as opposed to the same person, who's like, oh yeah, I've climbed that mountain 7 times before. It's so I started thinking about that too. Like it's the same act, but so I think about things like um just going into a new job, like interviewing for a new job, right? And if you're super confident in your industry and you've been around a few years and like interviewing's kind of fun at a certain point, you're like, yeah, let's see what they got, um, as opposed to somebody who is really, quote unquote, really needs the job, like
mm.
everything's on the line, they feel a little less secure. Like how brave and courageous to show up and do that. So I think about those things too. And things like, I think about my mom when my dad got hurt. And so there's like no income. Your husband is suddenly in the hospital for like months. You've got 3 kids, all under the age of 9, and no income. Like WTF? And you just moved and left everything So I think about like how brave to wake up every day and just keep going. So I mean, and we all certainly probably have examples of that, people in our lives who you're like, man, just to get up and show up and act like normal when you know what it took. Or if you have, people who are sick, right? Who wake up and take care of kids and they have cancer, or I don't know. So those things, when I think about people who are brave, man, yeah, it gets really interesting for me, like,
Well,
that
it sounds
whole conversation.
like bravery is relative. Bravery is
Yes.
relative to your situation, the amount of risk you're used to taking, and whether or not it's something that you have choices or not. I mean, everybody's got a choice, even though it doesn't always appear that people have choices. Sometimes the choice is just to keep going.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
that's hugely brave, in my opinion. Just, just to like keep going, or, keep going to interviews if you're looking for a job. Or there are people out there that, like you said, Michelle, that, have multiple kids at home, and maybe there's not a spouse or a partner to help. And yet they manage to have a smile on their face and show up.
Mhm.
I've met some amazing people like that just like they show up, and maybe they show up to 3 different jobs and they still
Yep.
take care of 5 kids, but they show up with a smile on their face, and that's extremely brave.
Yeah.
Extremely brave, I think. So that's,
Yeah, I think it's the difference between like being brave in a situation that you have chosen to put yourself in.
Mhm.
Like I think about like the runs and stuff that I do. Like
Climbing Mount Everest, right?
like I've chosen to put myself through that. Like, you get to make that choice. Whereas people who are sick or have other things going on, like
Mm.
you don't get to make that choice. It's kind of made for you, and then how you react to that is the choice, I guess.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think how you face, how you show up every day. And some people show up in a way that just exudes bravery. To smile in the face of the adversity, or to take care of others, or,
Mhm. Yeah.
just kind of hold space for others, even though they're the ones that probably need the holding. You see that a lot.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
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 I love that.
Hmm.
And I mean, Amy, like what you did with your run,
Mm.
that was maybe rooted in passion, but you also really expressed tons of vulnerability. Once it kind of came out and you shared what you were doing the run for, and I mean, that to me, that was hugely brave as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't, and I think like for me, so I guess I don't know, have we talked about that on here? I don't even know if we've talked about it, but like quick
As a
recaps.
refresher, yeah. Go
Yeah,
ahead
I
and
was gonna
refresh.
say, so on June 14th, so actually rewind a little bit farther. In January of this year, my mom passed away, and so June 14th would have been her 82nd birthday. So I made the decision, and this is why I said, like, I made the choice to put myself in that situation where then you have to be brave. But so I decided to do 82 miles during the 24 hours of her birthday, like as a celebration of her birthday. And then we did it as a fundraiser for Archie's Blankets, which we've talked about on here before. So anyway, yeah, it took me, I have to say that the day that I finally decided that I was going to put it out there for the world to see that I was doing it, because, we wanted to put it out to start doing the fundraising stuff. Like the day that I hit published, I was like, oh, what have I just done? Because now like everybody knows that this is on your radar. So then it's like this whole fear of failure. Like, what if you don't make it? And I'd never run that for like 50. I've done some 50 milers, but that's the farthest I've gone. So we're talking, another 32 miles. I had no idea if I would actually make it, like, or if my body would just say, nope, done. So I think for me, that was the biggest thing. Um, and then I also had some people who were a bit against it. And yeah, so there you have something that's like you're super passionate about, and yeah, and then you don't get support from the people that you think you might, and yeah, you have
You
to,
pushed on anyways.
yeah, and I think that's where you have to choose to decide what you're gonna do.
To be
And
I have
brave.
to
To be
say,
brave.
I never had any, like, honestly, when you said you were going to do that, I'm like, it never crossed my mind that you might not. It's so interesting
it
that you were
crossed
like,
mine.
yeah, I'm like, oh yeah, well, surely Amy will do, like, if she has to like drag her, you know, self across the like, it just never crossed my mind that you wouldn't finish. Isn't that
Yeah.
interesting? Like when you
Yeah.
just said that, I'm like, oh yeah, it never crossed my mind
Yeah, there's a
that like
lot
you
can
might
go
not
wrong in
finish.
82 miles.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
like, oh,
And
of
Yeah.
course she'll
Yeah.
finish.
The
Well,
fact that
thanks.
you experience that same doubt and trepidation, maybe like as somebody who might think about like a 5-mile run would.
Yeah, or like a
Right?
5K. Yeah.
Like me.
Like,
But I mean, yeah, you're right. Because I would have thought the same thing, Michelle. Like I never would have doubted it either. But obviously,
Oh, Lord,
you had a
yes.
lot of doubts. Yeah. And you still
Yeah.
did it.
Like a lot. And I mean, and also like it it really is. And again, this is the bravery you choose versus the bravery that you're kind of thrown into, but like it's going to hurt. Like you I don't know of anybody that goes that far and
doesn't
doesn't
hurt.
have
Yeah.
pain. So it's the like how like it's that constant like how far can you push your like or what are you willing to push yourself through to keep going. And again, if it would have been anything like I felt like I was doing permanent damage, like
Mm.
I made that pact with myself because I want to keep running, like I didn't want to do anything to permanent damage. But I think one of the takeaways from that I said was like skin heals. And like the pain eventually goes away. And yeah, so that's another thing, like you have to decide like for that kind of bravery, again, for the people who are sick or taking care of sick people or things like that, it's a different story. But for like physical bravery, it's that point of like how far are you gonna push, and
Yeah.
how much pain can you endure to get to the end, sort of thing.
That made
Yeah.
me think, I think, and Lara, you're the only one on here who's experienced this, but I have to imagine having children
Like
is
childbirth.
really, yeah, is really
And then they have
scary,
multiple. You have two.
right? Like, I can't imagine,
Yeah.
yeah. So how scary is that? Like when
It
you,
is.
yeah, like you have to
I
be really brave to have kids, I
I know,
think.
and I think a lot of people just like think, oh, you know, that's just what you do. But I think that's becoming a less common view. I know a lot of people now that are choosing to not have kids or don't have kids. And I think when we were so wrapped up in our, again, it was like the horse industry and it was my
Mm.
career, and we weren't really planning kids for quite a while. And it was funny because I used to kind of joke with friends, but we would be like, yeah, I don't know. Like, is it really better than just getting a puppy? Like, I don't know. Like, it's such a great thing when you get a puppy and it's so exciting. You wake up and the puppy's there the next morning. And then I remember after my first was born, Carter, um, a friend of mine without kids who later also had kids, but we had similar views on it. She's like, "What's it like?" I said, "You know that thing about the puppy?" She goes, "Yeah." I said, "Well, it is like that, but 1,000 times scarier and also 1,000 times better. But it's so much worse than having a puppy in the next morning when you wake up." And I do remember leaving the hospital thinking, because you're not there very long, like unless you know, I don't know, like normally you're out of there in like 2 days. And I think now it might even be quicker. And I just remember them bringing like, helping us put Carter into the car seat because they wanted to make sure it was in. And I was like, wait, don't we have to get licensed or something? Like,
Isn't somebody coming with us? Like,
we don't know anything about taking care of a baby. Like, you're really just gonna send this kid home with us without
just
any
a good
training
idea.
whatsoever? Like, what? And that's the first time it occurred to me that, you need a license to do just about anything, but not to have kids. Yeah. Nope. Don't have to
Oh,
have a license to take that
that's
baby
a
home.
whole
That's
topic.
scaring me so much. Yeah. Like I look at my friends who have children and I'm like, that takes some courage to have kids. Cause
Yeah,
man,
I haven't
yeah,
mustered
Amy
up
and
that
I are
courage.
over here like, okay, we're good. Amy will go ahead and run the 82 miles and I'll do my little courage
Yeah.
things over here. And yeah, no
Yeah,
babies. Thank you, Lara, for having
Oh, you're
yeah,
amazing
welcome.
children. We
Thank
appreciate
goodness
that.
my kids are amazing. They both
They
are
are.
great. And, and I think of all the brave things they've done. That's another thing. Like you were even talking about this, Michelle, like, just going for job interviews in a new city, or like, they both moved to different cities, they got jobs, and my daughter just recently had a job interview, and I know it takes so much bravery for that to happen. Like, I mean, I went through it, I did it, and I do remember how that was when you're just starting out and you're young, and you want to have your own apartment, and you want to be able to, pay for your meals and do all the things and not worry about all that. And
Yeah.
so it's a huge thing. Yeah, watching kids do their own bravery is it's rewarding, really. It really truly is. Yeah, so that
But I guess
that
going
part.
back to, I think Michelle was talking about this earlier, like, do you guys feel like you were braver about that stuff when you were younger than what you are now? Like, I feel like for me, like, I've kind of settled in now. I'm like, nah,
Yeah.
I don't need to do any of that. I don't need to do that.
Well, what's weird is like career-wise, no, because like I just did a
Well,
huge
yeah,
change.
Yeah,
yeah, we didn't even talk
But
about that.
huge.
when it comes to like other things, like, yeah, like I think being young, like I probably wouldn't pack up my car and move to a brand new city without a job. Like that's something I think that youth totally veiled
Yeah.
over, as how risky that was. Um
But don't
and
you
like
think
I
it's
wouldn't.
because you don't have anything to lose at that point? I
Yeah,
think
I
as
think
you
that's
start to
true.
acquire things, I mean, this is, certainly goes to the whole minimalist conversation,
Mhm.
but, you know, and certainly our culture, at least when we were growing, like you get a house and a spouse and
A house and a
kids
spouse.
and right. And then all of that, like, I mean,
And a
it,
401k.
yeah, like, how are you packing all that up and like, "Hi, honey, I've decided we should move, and we're just gonna sell the house." Like, it just doesn't you're not as footloose and fancy free, right? Like, you don't have
Right.
that, that ease of
And people do that
portability.
still. Even people do that, and that to me is hugely brave.
Yeah.
But like I feel like I'm really rooted where
Mm,
my house is, my home
yeah,
is. Excuse me, that
yeah.
was loud. Cut
Mm.
that out.
Nah.
Leave it
I
in, leave
think
it
I feel rooted in, like, it's my little comfort space. But
in.
when it came time, when I lost the passion that I had for what I was doing. In
Mm,
other words, what we talked about on the last podcast was burnout.
mm,
Um, with I had made my way, out of the stall cleaning and grooming into, sales job. But and sales is a great job to have. I mean, marketing and sales makes the world go round. But after many, 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 many moons of doing that, I got very extremely burned out, and the whole industry just burned me out. The horses themselves didn't. I mean, probably if I just stayed a groom.
right?
But yeah. I felt no passion about it anymore. And at the same time, when I was going through all the yoga stuff, and I think maybe that was my brave move, was really deciding to launch into yoga
Maybe
teacher
that was your
training.
brave maybe that was okay, so
Well, no,
let's
like the salt cave was probably the bravest thing I've ever
mm,
done.
that
But
was
the
pretty brave.
training, the teacher training, that was a huge step out of my regular
Mm,
life. When I signed up to do yoga teacher training in like 2018 or 19, I guess
mm,
19, that was out of my comfort zone because I
mm,
didn't know if I wanted to be a teacher. I just wanted to learn how to be a
mm.
teacher.
Yeah,
But that's really what led me to deciding to open the salt cave.
yeah. You know,
So, yeah.
I don't know, do you get so Maria Shriver does this, like, Sunday, paper. She does post this thing every Sunday, and, this Sunday, there was a quote in there, something like and it caught my attention because I knew we were talking about being brave, and it was something around being brave enough to trust our own intuition,
Oh,
Mm.
right?
yes.
And I was like, that just really struck me. Probably because we were gonna have this conversation, but it just I was like, wow, that is in this day and age, because again, we tend to wanna override that stuff, um, and yet we know, like, Lara, you knew,
That,
and you didn't override it, you just did
That
it.
is a brave thing, and people don't always know how to tune into their own gut or their intuition. And I mean, yeah, you can learn how to do that, but I think for me, part of it was age. And as I was getting older and I went through a period where I wasn't really listening to my inner voice very well, and I wasn't heeding my own intuition. And again, I think yoga helped me kind of get back into that. And then I decided to do the training. And then I decided to sign up for coaching. Again, like all these little steps of bravery led to a huge step of bravery.
Yeah.
But it was only after I think I started really tuning into my intuition. So that's a really interesting connection that you made.
Yeah. I was the did it struck me so much. I was just like, wow, okay, yes. Yeah, because that
Yeah.
is bravery in action, right? Like you have to be courageous to do that. Yeah.
And I think, Blair, something you just said just kind of reminded me. I'm like switching a little bit, but you were talking about like signing up for coaching and stuff. And I think, and Michelle, I know, was talking about, coaching and, what it takes to, go into coaching and stuff. And I know you're talking about more on, your kind of coaching, but I think the same thing on like the nutrition coaching or like run coaching or like fitness, like a personal trainer or something. I think one of the things that, and I totally admit that I was like, I don't know if guilty of this, but I fell into this too. Like, I was like, I can't, like, I can't hire a running coach. Like, I'm not a real runner. Like, I'm not finishing at the front of the pack in these big races, and I'm not an elite runner and all of this. So I think, being brave enough, and again, you were talking about like asking for help and stuff, like realizing that you can get coached. And the other thing, like I run into this with clients too on the nutrition side. Like I feel like they feel like they have to have all their stuff together before they come for coaching. And I'm like, no, that like
That's the whole
the point of,
idea.
it's kind of like the people that clean their house before the house cleaners come. Like,
Oh, yeah. Guilty.
Okay, I'm a little guilty of that.
Guilty.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you both
I
have
mean,
house
you got,
cleaners?
I
well,
do.
yeah. Oh, yes. Yes, I do.
Okay, so I'm apparently missing out on this. We have to
So
talk
when
about
I
this
worked
later.
from home,
But
I didn't have one when I worked from home because I worked from home, and for me, I had a flexible schedule and the kids were not around at that time. Like when they were younger, I still never had one. I don't know why. Probably because I didn't value my time as much. That actually leads me to believe that leads me to something that made me want to jump in, Amy, because you were saying like, oh, I'm not really a runner. Like, what do I need a coach for? I think you've touched on a really important thing about bravery. Is bravery is sometimes recognizing your own value, that you are worth spending the money or spending the time or making that commitment. And it's a really brave choice to choose yourself sometimes. Knowing that you're going to be a better person all around for it, better for everybody else in your life too.
yeah.
So like that's what that to me is like. In your head you're like, oh, I'm not really a serious runner, I'm not that good of a runner or whatever, but that's just not valuing, that's just not giving yourself enough credit.
Yeah.
And that's what people do, and that's why they probably don't seek help a lot of times.
Yeah.
Yeah, or like the people that are like, I can't sign up to work with a personal trainer because I'm not fit. Like
Exactly.
and I get that. Like I understand that, but at the same time, like that's the point of them.
Yeah.
And I think, because thinking about this too, I think one of the reasons that I even considered it was because of riding, right? Like if you want to, I don't really care what level you ride at. If you want to get better, you work with an instructor. Like it's just common in our world. Like if you want, and that's acceptable, right? So for me, I always thought about getting a coach really similarly to oh, well, I would pay somebody for an hour of their time to teach me how to ride better. Why wouldn't I pay somebody, and I'm never going to the Olympics. I mean, let's just get really clear about that. When I was, my first riding instructors, it was like, okay, well, let's learn how to post, like, so I kind of always had in the back of my mind that if you wanted, that's so weird, that if you wanted to learn how to do something better, you could get somebody and pay them to help you get better. Now, that's not to say that I didn't question that, especially when I decided to get trained as a coach, because if anybody does that for real and goes through some of those coach trainings, they're super expensive and super time consuming, like really good ones. You're talking a couple of years of your life and a chunk of change. So I did certainly question that decision multiple times. Like, what am I doing? But like you said, one of you guys said about sort of investing in yourself, right? Like, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you want to
Yeah.
be better at just sort of living life, like better at your relationships, better at your job, better at how you show up for conversation? Like one of the best things I ever did, Beth Watson, if you're ever listening to this, Beth Watson does this thing called navigating challenging dialogue. She's a coach, but she focuses just on primarily on that. And she does a lot of work with not-for-profits. And I went through, she had a week-long workshop, and I was like, I don't know why I'm doing this, but it just seems like a cool thing to do. And it's in California. So what the heck? It was before COVID. And it was one of the most powerful things I've ever done for myself. Um, so yeah, it's okay to just want to be a better version of yourself, right?
Yes, and you're right about the investment. I think people don't think of things like that as an investment. We invest in having nice cars and a nice house and furniture and the best
Clothes.
appliances and all these things, but that doesn't really do anything for ourselves. Like it might make our lives a little more comfortable and easy, but it's not investing in us personally. It's not, like you said, like in relationships, like in your dialoguing ability and your ability to solve problems. Or if you want to get better at whatever your passion might be,
Mhm.
you
Or
know,
just make your body better, right? Like your
right.
health, right? Like,
Yeah, investing in your health, that's a huge, huge thing
yeah,
that people,
Yeah.
just say, oh, it's too expensive or whatever. Well, what's the alternative? The
yeah.
alternative's way
Yeah.
worse.
Isn't it amazing though how brave you, and I think, and I could be making this up, so clearly take this with a grain of salt. But I think it's super hard for women because it always seems like there's some, especially if you're, and again, I'm making this up, I think, especially if you're like have children or whatever, like where, oh, I'm gonna, instead of getting the new refrigerator, I'm gonna take that money and, do yoga this year, right? Or,
Yeah,
do
that
you know
is
what I mean?
somewhat true. I agree. There is
I
some of
feel
that.
like, yeah, I feel like there's that for women, it's even harder to make that a priority.
Invest in
Like,
themselves.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
and here's maybe that might explain why a lot of women make transformations
Mm,
in their 50s and
After their
even
kids are in.
later
yeah,
Mhm.
because the kids are out of the house most of the time.
yeah.
Not always, but most of the time. You might have a little more flexibility with your schedule if you have an established job. You might have more money because you've been saving or doing whatever you
Mhm.
need to
Or you
do,
don't have kids to pay for anymore.
or you don't have kids at all, and so you hopefully been putting that money away. And you start saying like, "Hey, it's time to focus on me." And I think that's common for women.
And
And I
so
might
kind
be
of
making
that,
that up.
there we go. Don't you love that? We could just make things up.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that goes back to this original question that we asked, which was like kind of, are you braver when you're younger or older? And I think
Mhm.
I think you can sometimes be braver when you're older, but it's in a different way than it is when you're younger, right?
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
I do and say things now
Yeah.
that my younger self would be like, oh, you can't do that. Now I'm like, oh,
Yeah, that is true. I think
right?
it's being more comfortable with yourself
Yeah.
too.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
get to a
And
point
less,
where you feel more comfortable with who you are.
yeah, and sort of less hung up on the idea of other people having some sort of power or control, or less worry about being right. Because the biggest fear people have is being kicked out of the tribe, right? Because you
Yeah.
die if you get kicked out of the tribe. And I think over
I'm
time,
okay being on an island by
yeah,
myself as long as
I,
my dogs can come now.
You
I
just
think
find a
over
new
Kick me
tribe.
out. Kick me
you're
out.
like, I think I'm okay. Like, okay, yeah, if you want to
Yeah.
kick me out, you're lost. So sad, too bad. But this is how I feel, and this is what I'm going to do. And I don't know.
Yeah, it's so funny because I thought about that earlier when we were talking about being braver when you're young or
Mm.
older. And I think it's very different. And I've found myself just in the last few years being like, like before, and I've said this even on some of like the posts that I've done and stuff for like my nutrition, but um there was a time I never would have put some of that stuff out there just because like until it was over. Like if I
Yeah.
did like a big race or something, I might put it out after it was over, but never ever before because I'm like, crap. What if this goes horribly wrong and I don't like finish it or I quote unquote fail really, Um but yeah, I've kind of gotten to the point where I'm like, screw it. What's the worst that can happen? Like,
Oh, that's the
so
game I
like,
play all the time.
What's the
yeah,
worst
Do you
that can
ever play
happen?
that game? What's the worst that can happen?
yeah,
I don't know. I
like,
wonder if there's any studies done on people's mindsets, if that plays into people who do more, what is considered brave things or
Mm.
risky things. But,
yeah,
like I think when I decided to start a business, I kept thinking like, okay, what if, what if, what if? And then I played that scenario all the way out
Mm.
to, okay, if I had to live in my car, like I have a hatchback and I could literally put a whole full size sleeping bag back there. I could go to a campground for a few weeks. And then I was like, okay, you also have a sister and a mom that would take you in, you know? Not to mention a pretty cool ex who, if worse came to worse, I think we'd help each other out. But I mean, seriously, like
yeah.
I played the scenario out, like down to the actually like being
So
destitute and
buying the sleeping bag.
yes, and like, okay, I would survive. And I think once I told myself that if that happens, I still will survive, that made it much more comfortable for me to just like take the plunge.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
we'll see. Hopefully, I don't end up that way. But
I
Well,
don't think you're going to.
I don't think so either.
Yeah,
So
I don't
anybody
think so.
who's in Lexington, Kentucky really needs to go visit Lara
Yeah.
at the Lexington Salt Cave. Just we want to keep her out of her hatchback, right? And her
ooh,
sleeping bag.
free
Yeah,
advertising. I love it.
yeah,
Yeah.
seriously.
And one
Go
of these
visit Lara
days, the three monkeys are going to reunite in
in
person
Yes,
Lexington.
in Lexington
Yes.
at the
And
Salt
we're going
Cave.
to host a really cool event at Lara's
we
Salt Cave.
are. We're
She
gonna
just
do a
Yeah.
doesn't know
little
it yet.
Stay
a
tuned.
wellness
She doesn't know it
workshop.
yet, but Amy and I are plotting. So
I
we'll
love
keep
it.
you posted.
I
Yeah.
love
Yeah.
that. We'll do it.
Oh
We
my
will.
gosh. Well, I feel like we could definitely like talk about this one for
I
ever.
know.
This will
I
have to have
know.
a part two.
Yeah.
So, just to recap, I feel like we really have established this. Thanks, Brene Brown, for the idea, but like we just like illustrated it really well. But like vulnerability and bravery, they're just tied together so tightly.
They are. They are.
And listening to that
Yeah.
gut feeling and finding that
Yeah.
intuition.
Thank you, Maria
Yeah.
Shriver. Yeah.
Yeah, that was all right. Thanks for Maria Shriver. Yeah, I mean, if anybody would like to reach out, feel free to email us and share your story or send us a message on social media. It's just Monkey Chatter at Monkey Chatter on Instagram and Facebook.
Yeah.
And
And
yeah, we'd
Three
love to
Monkeys
hear your
Wellness
story. Oh
at
yeah, you want to
Gmail.
say the email?
Three Monkeys Wellness at gmail.com. And three is spelled out THREE. I had to think about how to
Like
spell
what's
that.
three monkeys wellness?
It's okay.
Uh,
It's been a long day.
yeah, I do think we should We should go back to our chant though, because we
Oh,
have
now that we
we're
don't have
so
guests.
out of practice.
Okay. All right.
Now that we don't have guests that we are gonna scare away.
Yeah.
Oh, and we have to say, like, I know our last episode made it to YouTube, but we are on YouTube now. So
Mm.
yeah.
And that
Yay.
is terrifying. Talk about
Talk
It
about
is.
being
Just wanna throw that out
brave.
there. Yeah.
Yes.
That might
I'm just
be a very brave thing.
Yes. Just
forcing you guys to be brave.
Amy is
Just so
forcing
you know, we never set this up to be videoed, so it's not going to be the prettiest video.
No, but you
we are real
show
people
up. Yeah,
in real
we are
places. Doing real things.
I really
Real
have makeup
people
on the days
with
that we record.
real tired eyes and not fancy houses.
But we're brave.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mm.
Anyway,
So
okay,
brave.
so
We're
gonna
so
try.
brave. We're going to try and do our little chant. All right.
Okay,
You
ready?
going to count us down, Amy?
Oh, ready?
Monkey chatter, monkey chatter. Who you hang
hang
with
with
matters. Woo.
That
Woo.
was very
Terrible.
We get slower and slower every time.
Okay, we gotta. Okay, the next one we'll try and step it up. Thank you,
Okay.
everybody, for bearing with us. Peace
Yeah.
out. Yes.
Yeah. Peace
Yeah,
out. Oh,
peace
yeah.
out,
Maybe
everyone.
we should bring back peace out.
Holy
Sayonara.